Okay, a fantastic response. Fantastic response. You raise some good points, and more, you raise a context wherein we can clarify some of these matters. Well, okay. Metaphors work by creating analogy between unlike things, but we recognize that they are unlike, and that's how they work. If I say that love is a falcon, and you say, oh yes, love is a falcon, and you were to hi Scouty, yeah, I'm stealing that one from you, and you were to literally view them as analogous, my metaphor would have failed, and you would not have understood the thing that I was trying to impart. So metaphors work first by, and this is pertinent, first by your capacity to recognize and my capacity to recognize that this is to some degree a false analogy. But second, and here I'm stealing from Nate, bubonic Nate. They are most effective in the areas where they don't work at all, where the attributes of the thing that I am describing as another thing do not correspond. Because that's when it's in our reaction to the breakdown of the metaphor that I think we have opportunity for real clarity, as we do here. Um, the wave analogy, yes, breaks down. Absolutely breaks down. First, because of, not entirely because of the reasons that you're citing here, but it does break down. Uh, issues like surface tension, relative constant, so on and so forth, don't really apply in our metaphor here. Now, certainly, certainly some force of influence may be lost, but again, first we're going to have some horrifying difficulties trying to quantify human influence into any sort of commutable value. Um, and second, influence doesn't actually behave this way. The wave metaphor is all well and good for maybe an introduction to the subject, but as you have objected to ways in which that introduction breaks down, yes, we have an opportunity to move on to the good stuff. Where is the lost force in Beyond Good and Evil? Or categories? Or a particularly well-spoken Jew getting publicly executed? Um, that's kind of the problem there. Or for that matter, where are what was the lost force of um, a particularly depressed a particularly depressed clerk rattling out novels that he kept in his desk drawer with a standing living will that they were to be incinerated on his in the event of his death. I'm referring to Kafka there. Um, these these actions and these events are not so predictable. These actions and these events are not so predictable. If we were to continue our analogy of the wave, um, the surface constant, the rate of decay, these things are not truly quantifiable, they are not predictable, and we cannot truly foresee the degree of impact that a given action is going to have. Um, for that matter, who would say that the assassination of a minor Italian noble was going to spark a global political conflict that was going to completely redefine international boundaries, international law. For that matter, the way that the concept of nation has significance in human history. Who knew? Um, The other side of this is, of course, the notion of there actually being a surface tension in history. Um, Again, bad metaphor, but oh, this notion of progressive inevitability, um, wherein the question we would say that if that minor Italian noble had not been assassinated, we still would have wound up with World War One, um, or for that matter, that many people point to parallel developments in scientific research. When so and so was working on such and such, there were a dozen other people who were perhaps already had made the same discoveries but weren't as well publicized, so on and so forth. But I have to, in looking at the problem of the significance of action, I have to look at those two thoughts simultaneously. This notion of complete unpredictability of ultimate impact, wherein seemingly insignificant actions, um, given enough time, or given the right circumstances, have staggering global ramifications. Um, or on the other hand, the notion of there being some inexorable and inevitable pacing to history and event. And here again, in both of these, we're talking about at the global scale. At the global scale, one's one's observable impact on the totality of human history. In the more immediate sense, well, first, yes, we do have some concern for our environment, for our immediate environment, as you put it, the wave ricocheting and rocking our boat. But on the other hand, I do not believe that. I do not believe that violence done to one person, for example, is violence done exclusively to that person. Um, and I don't think we can identify a point at which competing forces negate each other. I honestly don't think that we have. I don't think we have the tools, mechanisms, or system necessary, and I don't think that any system that would adequately quantify this, so that we could factor out the point of zero effective inertia. I don't think such a system is possible, because of these complications of, well, again, unpredictability of circumstance and the Gestalt factor, um, and on the other hand, some elements of human history having a fairly inevitable and inexorable march in a given direction. Response to the environment of force, essentially. The notion that these competing forces in human history, in human society, and culture will bring about certain outcomes at certain periods of time. And speaking of time, I'm running out. But screw it, I'm going to make this a two-parter. This is interesting.